Picture this. It's 1965. You wake up in a house built with Sears materials, wearing clothes ordered from a Sears catalog, eating breakfast next to a Sears refrigerator. You drive to work past a Sears store the size of a city block. Your life insurance is through Sears. Your savings account is through Sears. Your kid's baseball glove, Sears. This wasn't a store. This was America. At its peak, Sears controlled 2% of the entire United States GDP. 2% of the whole country. One company. And then one man, one spectacularly arrogant hedge fund manager, decided he knew better than 130 years of retail history. He didn't. What happened next is one of the most brutal corporate destructions in American history. And almost nobody stopped him. It starts with a watch. A broken shipment of pocket watches, a 23-year-old railroad station agent in Minnesota named Richard Warren Sears, and a hustle that would reshape American commerce forever. The year was 1886. Sears bought the unwanted watches cheap and resold them to other station agents along the line at a profit. Within a year, he had a company. Within 2, he had a partner, watchmaker Alva Roebuck. Within 5 years, Sears Roebuck & Company was shipping goods to rural Americans who had literally never had access to quality products before. The catalog was the weapon. By 1897, the Sears catalog was 532 pages long. It sold everything: shoes, farm equipment, medicines, furniture, guns. Ready-to-assemble houses, over 70,000 of them shipped between 1908 and 1940. You could literally order a house from a catalog, and it would arrive in a crate on a train. No Amazon Prime could touch that level of audacity. Rural Americans called it the wish book. And they meant it. For millions of farm families isolated from cities, the Sears catalog wasn't just commerce. It was hope. It was a window into a better life. By 1906, the company went public on the Chicago Stock Exchange. Revenue was exploding, and Richard Sears understood something fundamental. If you give people what they want, where they are, at a price they can actually afford, they will be loyal to you forever. We can and do sell more goods in a day than many merchants sell in a year. By the 1920s, America was changing. The car was king. Rural families weren't isolated anymore. They could drive to town. And a catalog wasn't enough. Sears needed to meet people where they were going. So under CEO Julius Rosenwald and later General Robert E. Wood, Sears pivoted hard into brick-and-mortar retail. The first Sears retail store opened in 1925 in Chicago. It wasn't a test. It was a declaration of war. By 1933, Sears had 400 stores. By 1941, it had 600. The strategy was brilliant and simple. Plant massive stores at the edge of cities, where land was cheap, parking was abundant, and cars could bring the masses. Sears wasn't just following the suburbs. Sears was helping build them. General Robert Wood ran the company from 1928 to 1954. Under his watch, revenue grew from $254 million to $3 billion. That is not growth, that is a moonshot. Sears was the largest retailer in the United States, by a massive margin. It operated its own insurance company, Allstate, founded in 1931 and named after a Sears tire. Its own savings and loan. Its own real estate brokerage, Coldwell Banker, acquired in 1981. Its own stock brokerage, Dean Witter, also acquired in 1981. Sears wasn't just a retailer anymore. It was a financial empire wearing a hardware store's apron. At its absolute peak in 1969, Sears began construction on the Sears Tower in Chicago. 110 stories. 454 feet tall. The tallest building on Earth. Because why not? When you control $1 in every $50 spent in America, you build the biggest tower in the world. For decades, Sears wasn't competing. It was lapping the field. While Kmart and JCPenney fought for scraps, Sears operated on a completely different level. Then Walmart arrived. and the math became brutal and inevitable. Here is a hard truth about giants. They don't get knocked down overnight. They rot from the inside, slowly, for years, while everyone pretends not to notice the smell. Sears's problem started in the 1970s. America's middle class was fragmenting. Discount retailers like Walmart and Kmart were eating the low end. Specialty retailers, The Gap, Circuit City, Home Depot, were surgically removing entire product categories from Sears's reach. Why buy tools at Sears when Home Depot carries more and knows more? Why buy clothes at Sears when The Gap fits better and feels cooler? Sears tried to fight on every front at once. It diversified into financial services, Allstate, Dean Witter, Coldwell Banker. The theory was smart: sell people a house, insure it, finance it, furnish it. A complete financial life under one roof. But the execution was a disaster. The stores suffered. While executives obsessed over stock trades and insurance premiums, the physical retail operation was starving. Floors weren't updated. Staff weren't trained. Inventory systems were ancient. And then came Walmart. By 1990, Walmart hit $32.6 billion in revenue. Sears was at $55.9 billion. Still ahead, but Walmart was growing at 30% per year. The math was brutal and inevitable. In 1991, for the first time in its 105-year history, Sears was no longer America's largest retailer. Walmart had passed it. Sears' response? Panic. In 1993, under CEO Edward Brennan, Sears announced it was killing the famous catalog. 97 years. Gone. The Wish book, the thing that had built the entire company, discontinued because it was losing money. It was like a football team cutting their quarterback because he got injured. Sure, technically it made sense. But it also signaled something darker. Leadership had completely lost the plot. Before we get to the final destruction, we need to talk about the people who actually built this thing. Because behind the revenue numbers and the catalog pages and the corporate mergers, there were hundreds of thousands of human beings whose entire lives were built around Sears. At peak operation, Sears employed 350,000 workers in the United States. 350,000, more than the U.S. Army in peacetime. These weren't just cashiers and stockboys. Sears had in-house manufacturing operations, its own buying teams, its own testing laboratory that rejected products failing quality specifications, which pushed supplier quality higher across entire industries. Sears was also, by mid-20th century retail standards, a relatively decent employer. It offered pension plans, profit sharing going back to 1916, and employee stock ownership. Julius Rosenwald, who ran the company in the early 1900s, donated the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars to build over 5,000 schools across the segregated South. But it wasn't all clean. Sears had a documented history of discriminatory hiring and promotion practices, particularly for black employees, who found ceiling after ceiling blocking advancement. Female employees were routinely channeled into lower-paying departments regardless of ability. These were not aberrations, they were policy. By the 1970s and 1980s, Sears was fighting multiple employment discrimination lawsuits, including a landmark EEOC case in 1973 covering tens of thousands of employees. They settled for $18.3 million. The people who gave their careers to that company, decades of loyalty, retirements built on promises, were about to have everything placed on a hedge fund manager's poker table. Edward Scott Lampert, remember that name, Harvard-educated, former Goldman Sachs, founder of ESL Investments, nicknamed the next Warren Buffett by people who should have known better. In 2003, Lampert's hedge fund acquired a controlling stake in Kmart as it emerged from bankruptcy. Then, in 2005, he engineered a merger between Kmart and Sears for $11 billion, creating Sears Holdings Corporation. Lampert became chairman. The theory, at least the one he sold to Wall Street, was that combining these two struggling retailers would create enough scale to compete with Walmart and Target. It sounded plausible. It was a lie. Here is what Lampert actually did. He had no interest in fixing retail. He was never a retail guy. He was a financier. His real interest was in Sears's assets, specifically its massive real estate portfolio. Sears owned or controlled roughly 4,000 locations across America, including anchor positions in hundreds of premium shopping malls. That real estate was worth billions. But to unlock it, Lampert needed control. And once he had control, he stopped investing in the stores. Dramatically. Between 2006 and 2011, while competitors spent 2 to 3% of revenue on capital improvements, Sears spent less than 1%. Stores that were already dated in 1995 were genuinely decrepit by 2010. Paint peeling, fixtures broken, lighting dead, inventory thin. In 2011, Lampert spun off 235 Sears and Kmart locations into a separate real estate investment trust called Heritage Growth Properties. Then, Sears paid rent to Heritage for the very stores it had previously owned outright. The company was literally paying rent on its own former property to a company that Lampert also controlled. Analysts called it self-dealing. Others called it something less polite. He's not a retailer. He's never been a retailer. He thinks he can learn it from reading spreadsheets. You can't. This is where it gets truly bizarre. Because Lampert didn't just mismanage Sears, he conducted a live ideological experiment on 350,000 employees and a 130-year-old institution. Lampert was a devoted follower of Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. Individual self-interest above all. Competition between individuals produces optimal outcomes. So, in 2008, he restructured Sears Holdings into 30 separate business units, each one competing against the others for internal resources. The appliance division competed against the tools division. The clothing department competed against the auto center. Each unit had its own management, its own profit and loss statement, its own agenda. The theory, straight out of Rand, was that internal competition would drive efficiency and innovation. What actually happened was a death spiral of institutional infighting. Department managers hoarded resources. They refused to cooperate with adjacent teams. The store stopped functioning as a coherent retail experience. A customer coming in to buy a refrigerator might find that the Kenmore appliance team had zero incentive to walk them toward the installation service team. That was a different business unit's revenue. Employees described it as working in a company actively at war with itself. Forbes journalist Sean Tully called it an experiment in Ayn Rand capitalism that was destroying Sears. Meanwhile, Lampert was running the company remotely from his compound in Florida, conducting management meetings via video conference, sometimes through a digital avatar platform. The CEO of a 500-store retail empire managed through a screen, while the floors rotted, while the shelves emptied, while the customers walked away and never came back. Let's run the numbers on this disaster, because they are staggering. In 2006, the first full year of Sears Holdings, the combined company had 500 stores and $55 billion in revenue. By 2010, revenue had dropped to $43 billion. By 2014, it was $36.2 billion. By 2016, $22.1 billion. By 2017, $16.7 billion. Each year, faster. Each year, more stores closing. Between 2010 and 2017, Sears and Kmart closed more than 800 locations, 800 stores, in 7 years. Communities across America woke up one by one to find their mall anchor gone, their downtown Sears gone. Thousands of full-time workers who had spent entire careers with the company were handed a pink slip and a diminished pension. The workforce shrank from 350,000 in 2006 to 68,000 by 2018. 280,000 jobs gone. Those weren't just jobs. Those were health insurance, pension contributions, seniority, 25-year careers built on loyalty. And throughout all of this, Lampert's hedge fund, ESL Investments, was lending money to Sears Holdings at interest. The company was paying its primary shareholder, who was also its CEO, loan interest while it collapsed. In the decade between 2005 and 2018, ESL collected over $2 billion in various payments from Sears Holdings. The house was on fire, and the fire department was charging for the hose. This was not mismanagement, this was something more deliberate, and everyone who looked closely enough could see it. On October 15, 2018, Sears Holdings Corporation filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. 132 years. That is how long Richard Sears's little watch hustle had lasted. From 1886 to 2018, 132 years of American history. And it ended with a bankruptcy filing while Lampert was simultaneously submitting a bid to buy the company's assets out of its own wreckage through ESL Investments. The audacity was breathtaking. Sears's bankruptcy trustee and creditors committee fought Lampert hard. They sued him in 2019 for $2 billion, alleging fraudulent transfers and systematic self-dealing transactions that had stripped the company of assets while insiders collected. The lawsuit settled in 2019 for $175 million, a fraction of what was alleged to have been extracted over the years. Meanwhile, the asset liquidation was merciless. The Kenmore appliance brand, once synonymous with American kitchen quality, sold off. The DieHard battery brand sold to Advance Auto Parts for $200 million in 2019. The Craftsman tool brand sold to Stanley Black & Decker for $900 million in 2017, years before the bankruptcy, one of the last valuable assets stripped while the patient was still technically alive. When the dust settled, a shrunken remnant of Sears Holdings survived. Not a comeback. A ghost. By 2023, Sears operated fewer than 20 stores in the entire United States. 20, down from 500. The mall anchors Sears had occupied for 40 and 50 years sat dark and hollow. 100,000 to 200,000 square feet of dead retail space per location, blighting communities from coast to coast. Corporate failures don't happen in boardrooms. They happen in communities. And the community damage from Sears's collapse is still being tallied. When a Sears store closes in a mid-size American city, the ripple effects are brutal. Mall anchor stores generate foot traffic that keeps dozens of smaller tenants alive. When the anchor dies, the mall often follows. The International Council of Shopping Centers estimated that a single anchor closure reduces mall traffic by 15 to 30%. Multiply that across hundreds of closures simultaneously. Small towns that had built their commercial identity around a Sears, in many cases their anchor since the 1950s or 1960s, were left with scarred commercial corridors and hundreds of suddenly unemployed workers with nowhere to go. Danville, Virginia, Terre Haute, Indiana, Pueblo, Colorado. You can drive through dozens of mid-size American cities right now and find the same picture. A massive dead building, a crumbling parking lot, and a community still trying to figure out what comes next. Some malls repurpose those spaces. Medical clinics, community colleges, Amazon fulfillment centers. Others just let them sit. The environmental footprint wasn't clean either. Many Sears locations carried underground storage tanks, outdated mechanical systems, and soil contaminated from decades of auto center operations. Cleanup costs at some locations ran into the millions. Nobody was rushing to pay. And the pension story may be the darkest chapter. When Sears went bankrupt, its pension plan covering roughly 90,000 retirees was transferred to the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. Many retirees saw their benefits cut. People who had worked 30 years and been promised a specific retirement income found that promise was worth less than they thought, because a hedge fund needed to make its numbers. So where do things stand today? Eddie Lampert, through ESL Investments, purchased Sears out of bankruptcy in February 2019 for approximately $5.2 billion in debt assumption and other considerations. He kept the company technically alive under a new entity called Transform Holdco LLC. As of 2023, Fewer than 20 Sears and Kmart locations remain open across the entire United States. 20 stores. The Kenmore appliance brand survives as a ghost, sold online through limited channels, a name without a home. The DieHard brand is now owned by Advance Auto Parts. Craftsman is owned by Stanley Black & Decker and is thriving, proving that the brand had enormous real value that Sears simply failed to leverage for decades. The Sears Tower in Chicago was sold in 2009 to Willis Group Holdings and renamed the Willis Tower. The most visible symbol of Sears's global dominance, gone from the name since 2009. Lampert himself retained his Florida estate and his fund. The 2019 lawsuit settlement required $175 million, but allowed him to keep hundreds of millions in fees and loan repayments collected across the years of decline. No criminal charges were ever filed. The creditors received pennies on the dollar. The pensioners received PBGC rates. The communities received empty parking lots. And America lost a company that had literally helped construct the country. The houses, the tools, the appliances, the financial infrastructure. All of it dismantled and sold for parts by a man who understood balance sheets but had never once understood what Sears actually was. That's not business strategy. That's cannibalism. So what do we actually take from all of this? Because Sears is not just a sad story. It is a masterclass in how to destroy something extraordinary. And if you run a business, any business, these lessons are worth tattooing somewhere. Lesson 1. Your core operation is always the mission. Not the real estate. Not the financial services. Not the ideology. The moment Sears leadership stopped caring about the actual experience of walking into a Sears store and buying something, the company began dying. You cannot financial engineer your way out of a broken customer experience. You cannot spreadsheet your way back to relevance. When Amazon became the dominant force in American retail, it was because Jeff Bezos obsessed over the customer experience to a degree that bordered on pathological. Sears once had that same obsession. The catalog was built on making the customer's life easier and better. When that obsession died, the company followed. Lesson 2. Scale without investment is just slow liquidation. Sears's 500 stores were an asset, but an asset requires maintenance. Between 2006 and 2012, Sears spent less than 1% of revenue on capital improvements, while competitors spent 2 to 3%. You cannot win a retail war with a deteriorating physical product. Every peeling floor tile, every dead light fixture, every empty shelf was a vote by a customer to never come back. And they didn't. Lesson 3. Internal competition destroys companies. The 30-unit structure Lampert imposed in 2008 is one of the most thoroughly documented examples of how ideological management theory disconnected from operational reality kills organizations. Businesses need internal cooperation, shared culture, and unified purpose. Pitting departments against each other for resources creates a company that is at war with itself. The customer feels that chaos. Every time. Lesson 4. Know what business you are actually in. Richard Sears knew. He was in the business of giving ordinary Americans access to products and quality they couldn't otherwise reach. That mission was relevant in 1897 with the catalog. It was relevant in 1955 with the suburban stores. It was still relevant in 1995 if anyone had chosen to adapt it. The companies that survive disruption are the ones that hold on to their core purpose while aggressively updating their methods. Sears forgot the purpose, and when you forget why you exist, you stop existing. We have become a company that is not focused on the customer, and we are paying the price for it.